Hey guys. We've obviously got a great opportunity here to get together today to celebrate International Women's Day. I think I know most of you, but just in case I don't, I'm Renee, a solicitor in our legal division, and privileged to host our International Women's Day event today. I would like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land in which we gather and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. The aim of us getting together today is, of course, to celebrate and recognise the contribution, diversity and achievements that the women of Mulcahy Co give our business, and especially highlight our commitment to equality. Mulcahy Co are really serious about creating a place where women can truly grow and feel respected. It's our hope that you'll all leave today's event feeling supported and inspired, and I tend to think that will be impossible not to after you've heard from these ladies sitting beside me. So we're about to hear from these remarkable women who I'll introduce to you shortly, and then we'll have some time for questions and lunch. So if you can really try and engage and think of some questions while these guys are talking, it'll be great for us to have a bit of a conversation once they're finished. So the first of our speakers, who I'll introduce to you, is Ruchi Page. Ruchi is a Melbourne-based digital creator, writer and activist for visibility and inclusion in the beauty and fashion space. So I'm sure we've all got a lot to learn from Ruchi, so please make her feel welcome.
Hello everyone, and thank you so much for platforming my voice today. It's really meaningful. A little bit about me, my background. I was born in India and adopted into a all-white household. And fast forward a few years, learning about my identity was really came known to me when I was 10 years old, when I encountered my first racist incident. I was 10. I was just playing around, being silly, and kicked a ball away from a bunch of grade 5, 6 boys, and their response was to tell me to go take a bath and that my skin is dirty, and to go back where I came from. So at 10 years old, that's a pivotal moment where I didn't really focus too much on my exterior. And fast forward a few more years, holding on to those insecurities, it really does shape you. I reached 16 and had my first long-term relationship, and with all of these insecurities and wishing away my skin colour and, you know, being afraid of my lips and all these features that just seemed to really control and depict my value. Going into a relationship that I really counted on trust, and I depended on this relationship to value me in a way that I couldn't value myself. And unfortunately, toxic relationships came about, and this relationship ended in slut shaming, in fat shaming, and it was another world of understanding who I am based on another person's opinion. The reason why I'm telling you all this is because all of these insecurities that bundled up, they shaped a version of me that was determined to reclaim my power in my 20s. And bloody hell, I deserved it. That is something that I really, really needed. Turning all of the identity focus and understanding who I am without external opinions was a major life-changing moment. It was transformational. And I wanted to bring these conversations to social media, which brings me to today. Social media is a major platform, and representation really wasn't there for people that look like me. And seeing deeper skin tones, seeing curvy women, seeing bodies just in general, celebration of women just taking launch and exploring what they're actually capable of and exploring what it means to be multifaceted as a woman was something I wanted to really implement into social media. My passion for beauty and skincare and making all of those videos still remain, but I definitely wanted to kind of put a bit more purpose in the conversation. So when it comes to International Women's Day, when I think about my career, I'm so proud to be platforming conversations about being a woman, being sexual, being able to wear what you'd want without any type of judgment and any type of like fear. I feel like fear was something that controlled a lot of my actions, and it wasn't until now, really, when I'm 28 years old, that I can actually sit there and really defeat a lot of those perceptions. So platforming my voice on social media has led me to breaking quite a few stereotypes and contributing to the conversation. I've been able to speak with Mamma Mia and be a representative of Generation Z voices and talk about the nuances of inclusion and what it actually means to be inclusive. There is a new standard that we need to reach in the beauty space, and we need to take note of gender identities and what it means to be a woman, what it means to be an Australian woman. And this is something that I'm really proud to have spoken about with Australia's largest brands, smallest brands, as well as PR companies and media. So by putting conversation to action, you can reach something incredibly powerful and plant those seeds amongst so many women that might not have had that chance to really reflect and understand themselves. So I'm really proud of that, and it's exciting when society and media want to categorize you and put you in a box. It's okay to step out of it, and it's okay to defy what the standard is, because that's what we're doing here. We're redefining what it means to be beautiful as a woman. We're redefining all of those aspects. And if I can give one piece of unsolicited advice to you all, I would say, whilst categorizing exists for women, I would honestly just say to rebel, and rebel hard. Thank you.
Thanks, Ruchi. Another big round of applause. We will now move on to our next speaker, Leah. Leah might be a familiar face to a few of you. Leah is the Managing Director of the boutique planning firm Inception Planning, which was established in 2020. Leah's had 17 years experience in the planning industry with an extensive period at local council. She has ventured out privately, which has been a huge success for her, and also fitting to note that Leah's team includes 5 women. Thanks, Leah.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today. I really appreciate it. And what a lovely speech. Hard to follow. I also brought notes. So when I was preparing what I was going to say today, my nana rang me, which was last night, and she's a client of Mulcahy's and has been for some time, and she deals with the lovely Wendy when she sold her property. And just more recently, when my grandfather passed away, she moved all her will and estate and everything over to Mulcahy's. And so when I told her that I was invited to be a guest speaker, she was like, "Oh, it must be because I'm their client." It's got nothing to do with my merit, obviously. Purely to do with my nana. So, yeah, God bless her. So a little bit about myself. I grew up in a single parent family with a mother who worked multiple cleaning jobs, and she's a school crossing lady and still is now on MacArthur Street. If you go past there, give her a wave. So she did that and worked really hard to put a roof and food on the table for my sister and I. I really love school. You can read my reports. They all say how much I loved socialising and talking, and not much has really changed. I went to school up until year 10, the middle of year 10, when I lost my sister suddenly of a stroke. That really rocked me, to be honest, and made me question why I was in school, wasting my time learning. So I found myself a little bit lost for a couple of years. I say a little bit, my family say a lot lost. And then I found a job at a supermarket. And then within about 4 months of being there, I was offered a 2IC position to work in customer service at the front to manage people at night. My family thought, yes, she's hit the big time, like this is her ultimate end of year job, like she'll work here forever. Not long after this, I fell pregnant. And so I had a son, Max, when I was 18. So you can imagine how proud my parents were then as well. So for the first 7 months of my son's life, I was at home with him and thought, like, what are we going to do? What's our game plan? And I always knew that I wanted to study law. I don't know why, I just really liked it. So I went and enrolled myself in a graduate diploma in legal practice, and so I studied that and worked at night when my son was asleep. So I did that for a couple of years until kindergarten hit, and then I realised that juggling work and study was just a little bit too hard. So I just was a mum for the kindergarten years and tried to manage to pick him up from kinder on time, which was difficult. Split shifts. And then so when he hit school, I got a job as 2IC manager in a clothing store. The area manager there for the clothing store thought he was running the world with his clothing store, and his management skills were similar to Putin's, actually, to be honest. And one day my son was really sick, so I text messaged my manager and I said, look, I'm really sorry, I'm not going to make it in today. And he wrote back and said, I've told the area manager and he thinks you're lying. I was like, I couldn't believe it. So I started frantically writing a text message to my partner. I was like, can you believe this prick? He thinks I've lied about my son being sick. Anyway, I sent the text message, didn't send it to my partner. I had sent it to the area manager of Victoria. So my phone starts ringing, I'm like sweating, I'm the one now sick. And he rings and I'm just about to say, I'm really sorry. And he's like, stop, I'm the one that's sorry. I shouldn't have said what I said, like you've never called in sick before. I was frustrated, and so yeah, kind of called him out on his behaviour, even though it wasn't on purpose. So all I wanted to do was to wear a suit to work. When I was working at the clothing store, I was selling them, not wearing them, unfortunately. But so I found a job where you could wear a suit to work, and I applied and got an interview. 3-panel interview, and it was with local government, and it was a customer service role. And one of the questions was, can you tell me the difference between building and planning? And I was like, no. I couldn't even think of a lie. I was like, I don't even know where to begin to lie. And they all looked at each other shocked, and they're like, we don't know either. I don't even know why it's a question on the interview, so we all had a laugh. And they said I was the first person that was honest and said that they didn't know. So, believe it or not, I got a call back, and that's where my local government career began. So I worked in customer service for 2 years and was given an opportunity to be a paraplanner in the statutory planning team, which you may have met me there before I started my own business. Paraplanner sort of stood for not really having an idea of what you were doing, but happy to give it a go. That's what I thought it was. They threw me in the deep end. My manager overheard me on a phone conversation and said, you sound like you can translate complex matters into simple for people. Why don't you go and study to be a planner? So I did. I studied part-time and worked full-time and looked after my son. I worked through multiple different positions throughout my time at local government, and all the time I kept saying, I'm going to leave one day, I'm going to leave, and every time I said it I cried because I actually didn't know that I could ever say goodbye to people. Like, I'm hopeless with the whole saying goodbye. And then in 2018 I lost all my hair, well 75% of my hair, and had to shave my head due to alopecia. I don't know if any of you know what alopecia is, but yeah, so it's an autoimmune disorder that just attacks parts of your body, generally your hair follicles, and my hair fell out. So it was at that time I was like, okay, I need to make some serious changes in my life. And one of them was saying goodbye to local government. So the minute I did that, 3 weeks later, the world shut down with COVID. So I laid on the couch and cried for 3 days. And I thought to myself, what have I done? I couldn't tell my family because they already doubted the fact that I could even do it. So I laid on the couch and I thought, I know, I'll just pour beers. If things getting like really bad, I'll just pour beers. Then they shut the pubs. Like I can't even fall back on that. Anyway, so fast forward, thank you Tess. Fast forward 2 years on, I've got a wonderful planning consultancy that just hit the ground running in a time where we all thought things were going to be bad, and it actually was the absolute opposite in the building industry. I now employ 4 women, so there's 5 women. I get asked multiple times from my male colleagues that I deal with. As you can probably understand, the development world is generally male dominated. I don't know why that is, it just is. It's not a scary place, so if you're thinking about buying property and developing it, come to me, love to help you. But I get asked multiple times from men like, when are you going to employ a man? I'm like, when he can do the job. So I guess when I have to look back, I'm just going to go to my last page, thanks for Tess for coming out. When I was asked today to speak, I was like, why would anyone want to know about my journey and what makes me special and my story special? And I guess the whole thing about this year is about breaking the bias. And I guess when you think about it, and I'm a single teenage mum, it was like, maybe you weren't meant to be anything. So I think I've broken the bias with that. I only had a year 9 education, I left in year 10, and so maybe I've broken the bias with that. I worked in a supermarket, which, everyone sort of starts there. My parents thought it was the job, they would have been happy if I stayed there. So I guess now owning, my planning consultancy where, up to any time I've got 250 live jobs going at any one time, I guess I really have broken the bias. So thank you. I really appreciate you inviting me.
Our third and final speaker that we're going to hear from today is Tess Griffin. Tess is a mother, wife, dance teacher, and now hosts her own podcast, which is called The Innerview. On this platform, Tess interviews everyday people and they discuss real-life topics, providing a space for everyone to share their stories. In the hope to make others feel less alone in their struggles, Tess is passionate about sharing her own story and opening up with tough subjects like family and domestic violence and how this has shaped the person Tess is today. So thank you, Tess.
Hi guys, thank you so much for having me. I am incredibly nervous, especially going last. I don't know why I was picked to go last after these 2 amazing women. Like I said, thank you for having me. My name is Tess and I am a wife, like Renee said. I am a mum of 2 children. I have a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old, and I'm married to my husband Sam. We are actually clients of Mulcahy, and we really appreciate you guys. We built a really beautiful life for ourselves, and I guess circling back to my childhood, no one would really ever know the kind of childhood I had prior to my podcast coming out. I've been really lucky to meet someone and we have the same goals and values, and my children are having a completely different life to the life that I had growing up. So just to tell you a little bit about my childhood, I actually had a really young mum. She fell pregnant with me when she was 16 and my dad was 17. She also had my brother 16 months later by choice. It wasn't actually an accident. And then my dad committed suicide when I was 3. So my mum, by the time she was 21, she had 3 children and she was raising them alone. And that in itself is tough. And now as a mum myself, I can recognise how tough that would be. She had left school when she was really young. She had barely any education. She wasn't really interested in school as well. And then she was rocked by this huge trauma and having to do it all alone. And it was really a different time back then too. No social media. It was really, leaning on her parents, and that was that. But from there onwards, she found herself in multiple bad relationships. There was a lot of domestic violence, a lot of trauma, a lot of unsafe situations, and I'm sure if she could go back she would change it, but it definitely affected us as kids, and it's something that I never spoke about when I was going through school. I never told my friends, because when I would go to their houses that wasn't happening, and that wasn't something that you would really talk about. So once I got a bit older and I started getting into books, or I love documentaries, I love all of those kinds of things, and I think maybe I like them all and I'm drawn to them because I feel like I can relate to some certain things that you don't hear your friends or colleagues talk about. And then I came across a podcast called The Armchair Expert by Dax Shepard. Does anyone know that podcast? Yay! Okay, that's my favourite podcast. And when he started that, I purely listened because I love him. And he started talking about his childhood. And he's like a movie star. He's married to Kristen Bell. He started talking about therapy, why he's addicted to alcohol, how his mum had multiple different boyfriends and there was a lot of violence, and how it affected his relationship with his siblings, and his the guilt and the shame that he carries now as an adult. And he's, a billionaire, and he still struggles with those things. And I said to my husband, I've never heard anybody speak about this, let alone a big celebrity. Like on that platform, every episode he'll kind of bring it back to his childhood. And I found myself relating to someone who's a celebrity with $1 million. And I thought, how amazing would it be if I could share my story, and even if it was 1 or 2 people in Ballarat, doesn't matter if 5 people listen, and maybe they would feel less alone, or maybe they would not carry so much shame and guilt and feel so, I guess there's like an embarrassment of, this is what my childhood was like, and people don't really know that. So 6 months ago I started my podcast, The Innerview, and I mainly interview guests, but I also have told a little bit of my story, and there's, you could go on and on and on, but the 2 main episodes are about growing up amongst domestic violence and how that shaped me as the person I am today. And I've had such an amazing response. So many people reach out to me. The most surprising ones weren't actually the strangers. I've had listeners from all over the world, but the most surprising ones were my closest friends and family, and my friends throughout high school, who I spent every weekend with them. And I moved out of home when I was 16, so they were like, we had no idea. And I just think you can really change the trajectory of your life, and I'm trying to give my kids a different life to that. And the main thing I wanted to leave you, the women and the men, with, but the women in particular, especially if you're mothers, I guess that guilt and shame that you carry if you have those things happen in your childhood can then lead into being a mum and trying to be the best mum ever. And when you're working or you're doing something for yourself or having your own interests and a little piece of yourself, you always feel guilty. There's always something left for you at home. There's work at home, there's lunches to be made and washing to be done. But I know when I grew up, my mum didn't have anything for herself, no interest for herself, and I really felt that weight, and I felt maybe a little bit guilty, like she didn't get to have her life because she had us, and I don't want my kids to feel that way. So I think it's really important to, if you want to, whether it's work, whether it's catching up with friends, whether it's a little passion project like a podcast, I think it's really important to give yourself that permission to do something for yourself and be your own person. You don't have to be just a wife and a mother. I know having a successful husband, I love standing on the sidelines and cheering him on, but there should be space for us too. And I hope that with this podcast, I hope I can continue to grow it and share everybody else's story. So if anyone wants to come on, let me know. But yeah, thank you guys, and thank you both as well. It's a pleasure to speak with you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Tess. Let's move on to some questions, and then lunch is going to come out in about 15 minutes. So does anybody have any questions at all? Over to you, Annette.
Thanks, Ren. Thanks so much for coming to speak to us today, guys. First of all, I'd like to pose a question to Ruchi. Obviously, your job involves social media. I was wondering, obviously, social media can kind of exacerbate insecurities for some people. As a person who's grown up with a lot of insecurities, how do you balance that?
That's a really good question, because I think social media definitely has created so many insecurities for myself that I didn't even know I had. What I did for myself to be able to continue with this as a career is create for example, I'm very much on Instagram, so create a feed and consume media that fuels you as opposed to does not serve you. And I find now when I open up my apps, it's filled with people I'm inspired by. It's filled with people or makeup brands that I feel included by, and it's something that I've had the power of following and unfollowing and creating that for myself. And then, you know, you do have to do the work outside of social media. Be kind to yourself. You know, social media is a highlight reel. You know, you don't see me crying on social media. I'm definitely not going to film that. But especially because I have an ugly cry, so that's just not happening. It's definitely about creating something that serves you as opposed to being a discredit to who you are.
Does anybody else have any questions? I had one for Leah. So you spoke about your alopecia sort of being the trigger point for you to have the confidence to leave government and go out on your own. And I thought that there may have been some people here who are thinking about, you know, going for a promotion or changing their role or pushing to, I guess, work differently or harder or in a different kind of capacity. And I wondered if there was some advice that you could give them to sort of empower them to take that next step.
Thank you for the question. My alopecia actually kept me where I was for too long, I think, and by having that, that's a really good sign that your body's trying to tell you need to make a change. So whatever it is, do it and do it quick. So I really delved deep into myself in 2018, 2019, and really tried to work out why I think the way I think or why I'm making the decisions I'm making, because a lot of them were repetitive decisions. And I found myself in similar situations. So I just really wrote down about what goals that I wanted to achieve, and I tried the whole, I'm going to face my problem head on, and it didn't work because it wasn't my problem, it was other people's problems. And it ultimately was a staffing issue for me, and that staffing issue still is part of our ongoing influx in the development world. So I thought, well, I need to make the change. So I need to be in a situation where I've got control, because it does all come down to what you have control with. So then I made a list of all the things that I can control, and one of those was my health and my decisions and what my next step was. So I think I found myself reverting back to, I'm always trying to help. So I was trying to help a situation that was beyond my help. So just help myself. So help. Thanks.
It does. Carly, you had a question?
Tess, I just actually come across your podcast a few weeks ago, so I've only listened to a couple of episodes, but I'm just interested, is there a common theme to that guests often keep coming back to, like some other podcasts I listen to? Often it's a common theme or a common help that women or men come back to over and over again that kind of helps them navigate their way through whatever difficulties you have in your life at the time.
Thank you, and thank you for listening. That's so exciting. What I didn't mention is I always ask my guests the same 3 questions in the beginning, and one of them is, tell us about your childhood, what was life like for you growing up? And I found that even if they had a really idyllic childhood, that there's still something there with the way you were raised, the relationship you have with your parents. I feel like it always circles back to that. Maybe your birth order, like if you're an only child, if you're an youngest, this, that, if you have a fractured relationship with your family, I think that really comes back to that. I've tried not to put my podcast in a box. It's really hard because there are a lot of women that listen, and it would be so
I mean, it's so easy for me to just talk to women, and my husband's always like, need more men. But it's interesting because when the male guests do come on, they have been really vulnerable. A lot of mental health struggles, that's a common theme. And I guess the most common thread throughout the whole podcast is that you're not alone. Every single guest I've had on has had an influx of messages from strangers saying like, oh my God, I had the same thing, or I had a girl that has had bad anxiety and social anxiety, and then she was inundated with like, I never knew that about you, and I have the same thing, or I can't drive down a different road to work, just so many things that everyone ends up feeling like a little bit less alone, and it's really nerve-wracking to be that vulnerable, and we're both nervous, myself and the guests, but it's always worth it. And I think it's good to chat to people, just everyday people, because we're all kind of going through similar things even when we don't know it. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Del, thank you. This is a question for all three of you. So on Tess's podcast, she asks one of my favourite questions, what inspires you? So I'd love to know of all three of you, what's your, what inspires you every day?
What inspires me is, I have a lot of inspiration that goes into my content creation. So I love taking the unthinkable and the large and the massive and having a go at it, and actually not assuming that I can't do it. And but that applies to so many areas of my life. So for example, with my content, which is probably more of a easier way to explain it, I see huge campaigns, Tom Ford, and I see Fenty beauty campaigns, and perhaps younger me would see that as untouchable, but me now, I think, why not me, and why not give it a go, and why not intertwine those huge ideas into something that's also a part of me, and why can't I put my contribution into it? So it kind of applies to all areas of my career, but definitely the bigger the better.
That's good. Mine was easy to come up with. I just like helping people, and again, it's been a massive flaw. So it is about, I went through that period of time where I looked into myself and worked out where my common issues were. So I had to go back to, I need to help myself first, and then so gets me up out of bed every day. I've got clients who generally come with problems. Some come with ideas, and some of the time I'm creating those. Some of the time, quite the opposite to you, I'm actually telling them that those ideas are never going to work. But generally it is about helping people, so that's what gets me out of bed every day. Yep.
What inspires me, I think, empathy. I think it's probably, sometimes that's a fault of mine, where I'm empathising with, I drive past someone, I'm like, oh, they look sad, and that's not a good kind of empathy, but just empathy and self-awareness and a little bit of kindness. I think if you can just look at someone, it's so easy to judge, but once you kind of dig a bit deeper, I've found trying not to judge someone from just what you've heard or what you know, that inspires me when I see other people do that and have that understanding.
Would anybody like to share what inspires them? No. Legal work mostly inspires me. Any other questions? I have a question for Leah this time. In your role, just in the theme of breaking the bias, I'm interested to know how often you feel you consciously encounter bias, and how you break past it, and how you go about it.
Thank you. There's a part of this speech that I didn't say, so thanks for giving me the option. I forgot this part. No, I feel like I said to you, I'm in a male-dominant industry, and there's no reason for that, and I'm not pointing fingers, it doesn't matter. To me, it doesn't matter. But commonly I walk into a meeting and I feel intimidated, and it's not because of the people in the meeting, it's generally because I feel like we're programmed to feel like we should be, which is ridiculous, and I don't understand why, and I'm really trying to break that constantly because, again, hats off, most of the people I work with are my mentors and men, so it's got nothing to do with them at all. It's got nothing to do with them being a male. So I encounter it a lot, but not because of other people making me feel that way, and I just don't know why. One of the other things I feel like with my family, I did well just getting a job. You know, and I don't mean everyone's family was like that, but my nana was good because she had multiple children and stayed at home. So that's obviously where my mum should have been. And then when I was continuing trying to push the ceiling higher and higher, my family was trying to, what are you doing? That's not normal. And they weren't necessarily trying to keep me in a box. They were just scared for me because the world wasn't about women trying to be in that. And it's not that I was trying to shake up the world either, I just needed more and wanted more. So I feel like I've continued to break that bias, and I don't know why the world is the way it is, and I'm sure there's many reasons why, and there is, certain men in managers' positions, that's what you normally used to see, but I don't feel like I've had that. I feel like in local government, whatever opportunity I wanted and went for, it had nothing to do with whether I was male or female, but yeah. Does that answer that? Yeah.
Do we have any more questions? As much time as you as well.
Tess, I felt like you were left out, so I've got a question for you. Well, it's probably a little bit of a personal one, so I hope you don't mind answering, but you talk about creating this safe space to raise your kids and giving them a different life. You also talk about honesty in terms of the trauma that you've been through over the years. At some point, I guess, you'll have to have a conversation with your kids because this information is out there. Obviously a fair way down the track if you're at 4 and 1, but have you thought about that, and how do you envisage that happening?
That's a really good question. I think about it all the time because I'm a overthinker. I even have been a bit terrified of my son asking about how my dad died. Like, I don't even really want him to ask anything about him, and I bounce off my husband a fair bit. Like, what are we going to say if he asks this? And he's like, we'll just take it as it comes, but I want to make it age appropriate. But he did ask me about my dad, and then I said, he's not here anymore, he understands what death is, and he said, did it make you sad when you didn't have a dad anymore? And it made me cry because it's so innocent. But when it comes to like the domestic violence and things like that on the podcast, but there's so many things that I wouldn't even know where to begin, so I think I will seek out maybe I'll ask my psychologist, maybe I'll ask a counsellor, maybe I'll read, because I don't know. I guess the way with social media is moving as well, I just don't know what's appropriate, because I don't want to scare them either, but I also want them to have an awareness of what life is like, and I want my son to be a feminist if possible. I want him to really be the kindest man in the whole world, and my daughter not to hopefully find herself in those situations, but if she does, that she can reach out for support. It's really terrifying though, really, really terrifying.
Do we have any other questions? Catherine, you look bursting to ask a question. No?
I suppose I could.
See, I could tell. I could tell. But look, you were just squirming. I feel like Ellen DeGeneres.
You get to dance. Who wants a car?
I'll have one.
I suppose I just want to ask, I've got 2 daughters and they're in their 20s. I grew up, no social media was easy for me. Well, I think it was easy. Even though we had a lot less back then, I suppose just dealing with social media, that sort of thing, it's a good thing, but then I think, no, it's not. You have more problems, I suppose, worrying about self-image and all that sort of thing. and we shouldn't have to think about that. I don't think, anyway. We should just be, if you're a good person, that sort of thing. But yeah, I suppose, how do you think about that's like, because you are a lot younger than me, and I used to struggle with my girls explaining to them that it doesn't matter, you know, as long as you're that person, social media's got nothing to do with it at all. Yeah, so I'm probably rambling a bit. Yeah, so it's probably more that sort of thing. How do you, as a woman, it's men too, but how as a woman do you self-define yourself without social media?
I think that might be a good one for Ruchi.
That's a really good question, and as you were saying that, I was just thinking, God, what did I do? And it's a recent kind of realization for me is knowing that my identity is beyond my body. It's beyond my skin colour. It's beyond all of those things that the media, film, television chooses to hone in on women specifically. And knowing that for myself, and that I have so much to offer as a person first, and then, you know, if I would like to show off my body and if I want to embrace who I am and everything else, then that's my choice. And really grasping that idea, and it is an idea, it's something that has to sink into your mind. That's when I really was able to just not, can I swear? Not care about, I won't do that. I won't not care about other people's opinions and actually embrace confidence as an entirety. So hopefully that answers your question.
I have another one for you. There might be some women in the room. I know we've touched on being a mum and that balance of work, career, parenthood, but for those that aren't partnered or without children, I guess there may be that sort of reverse stigma as well for women who are choosing a career over a partner or parenthood. Would you have any advice in that respect as well?
Choosing career or just choosing to be you and live your life however you want to live it is perfectly fine. You know, I grew up here in Ballarat, and the rhythm of Ballarat lifestyle is to get married, have a child and go to uni, do all that, and I was so tied down by that because I wanted to break free and explore my own pathway. And it's so fine. It is completely okay one thing I learned is to stop judging other people's pathways and put all of that energy and attention into my own. And I've never looked back. That is the number one thing that I've been able to really focus in on is I am choosing my career. I don't have goals. I don't think children are part of my future. And it's so okay. It is completely fine. You do you. And I think that's the best way to live your life is go by your own expectations.